Well, one of the things that no doubt would have influenced Anthony Albanese to finally call a royal commission into anti-Semitism were calls from some of the nation's most distinguished former security experts, chief among them, Peter Jennings, who joins me now. Peter, thanks for coming on the program, especially this afternoon. What was your reaction to the Prime Minister's announcement today?
Well, I'm pleased that he did it, James. It was the mother of all U-turns, but I think he knew that he had to. And so now the issue is going to come down to how well Justice Virginia Bell is able to run this, because I have no doubt that over the life of the Royal Commission, the government is going to continue to try and spin its way out of any sense of culpability for what's happened in Australia over the last couple of years. So the things that I noted, just to follow up with your editorial, no mention of Islamist extremism, but there is a dot point that talks about extremism. So the Royal Commissioner will have the opportunity to investigate that area. Absolutely no mention, by the way, in the terms of reference about investigating government decision-making. So if you believe the Albanese government, everything that should be looked at here goes to who said what to whom between the police and the intelligence services, and everything just sort of stops at a glass ceiling below the level of government decision-making. That needs to be addressed. Then I thought there was a rather patronising series of language from the Prime Minister, which says, well, we need this now so that families can tell their stories about what went on. And I think that just mistakes the concerns of the Jewish community. It's not about telling stories. It's actually about seeing concrete steps taken to assure their security and to take Australian society back to some place where they feel they can be safe. And then the final concern I've got is constant reference, James, to this term social cohesion. And increasingly, this just seems to be a catch-all code word for governments wanting to hide uncomfortable truths or not wanting to talk about difficult things. So if you want to talk about the rise of Islamist extremism, that threatens social cohesion. No, it doesn't. We need to have a forensic look at that issue, just as we need to have a forensic look at the quality of government decision-making over the last few years. So to sum up, it's good that there's a Royal Commission. There's a lot of work in front of the Commissioner now to do this in a way which will demonstrate that she's going to be forensic and completely independent of a government instinct to spin. And I thought the brazenness of the Prime Minister in having vigorously fought against this for weeks to now turn around and say, well, it was really just a listening exercise. And, you know, now he's ready to make his decision. It was one of the more stunningly brazen exercises in political spin that I've seen.
Absolutely. And one of the things you just mentioned was the repetition of this talk of social cohesion. Tony Burke said it was very important that this Royal Commission was, and I'm quoting, conducted in such a way that it helps social cohesion. When I listened to that, I thought it sounds like they're going to prioritise social cohesion over truth and plain speaking. Was that your read of that?
Absolutely. I mean, they must think we're all dumb. You know, Australians are just too dumb to handle the truth. And yet the fact is that, you know, we have all of this come forward in court trials, in many areas of public life all the time, without a government sort of patronisingly saying that, well, if we hear difficult things, that could impact social cohesion. You know what? Lying about the problems that we face in Australia right now, that doesn't help social cohesion either. Pretending that there isn't a problem when clearly there is, that doesn't help social cohesion. So this has just become the latest buzzword of how governments will attempt to justify their spin doctoring. I hope it turns out to their cost that we will now have a process through the Royal Commission which is not going to allow that to get in the way of a forensic examination, because we need that for our own good, frankly, and in order to bring Australia back to a more positive place.
The other thing, and you mentioned this earlier, but in the terms of reference, the Prime Minister said the Royal Commission will look at the nature and prevalence of, and I'm quoting, religious and ideologically motivated extremism. Now, people sitting at home would think, is he talking about Islam? Would they be right to guess that, or Or is that what the Prime Minister wants us to do? He wants us to be literally guessing at what he might mean because it could mean any sort of religion. He's surely not talking about Presbyterians or Anglicans, is he?
Yes, the threat from Rastafarianism is not that great, I don't believe, but it's Islamism. Extremist Islamism is the phrase that will not pass the government's lips. And I think, so much for not wanting to take a forensic look at what's happening. That refusal to deal with the issue is now presented to us as, oh, well, if we look at it, it's a threat to cohesion. I mean, it's kind of Orwellian nonsense. But I think the fact that there is a reference to extremism in the terms of reference of the Royal Commission, well, that actually gives the Commissioner the authority she will need to look into it. And by all means, bring in far right and far left extremism too, because we've seen a lot of that on our streets. And let's look at it all and find out how a tolerant democracy can deal with these things. This could be a very useful function in the Royal Commission, and frankly, far more useful than, picking through the stories of the 48 hours before Bondi and the incident itself. There's going to be lots of coronial inquiries which will deal with those sorts of things. But the longer-term systemic issues and causes, I think that's where the Royal Commission could add real value.
You wrote a great article in the Australian today, and congratulations on that article. I read it this morning and thought it was absolutely spot on. But you argued that the horse had bolted for Albanese, who had fundamentally mishandled the terror attack and the broader rise of extremism, ignoring repeated warnings from Australia's security agencies and national security leaders. You pointed out how ASIO head Mike Burgess was among experts who had laid these warnings at the PM's feet. And I want to quote from your own article. You wrote, "All thinking people could see for themselves the direction in which Australia was heading, all except for Albanese and his government." So I guess I want to end with this question to you, Peter. Why has Anthony Albanese been so blind? He suddenly saw the light today, but why has he been so blind? Why did it take him for basically the whole country to be calling for a Royal Commission before finally he was able to bring himself to do it? What's wrong with the man?
I think they've spent 2 years tying themselves into ideological knots over the Middle East, the situation of Gaza, which means that they just did not want to deal with the issue of threats towards Australian Jews. I think there are clear political factors at play inside the Labor Party in terms of how they manage their branches and how they think they manage ethnic communities. I think they misread dealing with ethnic communities. They see them as blocks to manipulate rather than individuals to talk to. But that's where the government has dug itself. And what we've seen with Albanese is once he's dug himself into a position, he doesn't want to acknowledge that he might have got things wrong and move out. And so I'm sure it's only with great reluctance that he's made this change today with the announcement of the Royal Commission. He must have been told from senior people inside the party that he had no choice. And so it's
no doubt. I reckon he was shown some polling, Peter, and that may have had something to do with it. I got to go, but Peter Jennings, always a delight to talk with you, and thanks for your insights today.